You ever just look at someone and think, man, you are about to make the most expensive mistake of your life, and I'm going to get a front row seat? That's exactly where I found myself. Well, me and my poor mailboxes, who, by the way, were holding up admirably in the face of a one-man HOA vendetta until I just couldn't take it anymore. So grab a drink, settle in, and if you relate to petty power trips blowing up in spectacular fashion, you're going to love this one. Oh, and hey, tell me where you're watching from. I get a kick out of seeing these stories travel farther than the mail ever does out here. Now, my little patch of Texas isn't exactly what you'd call glamorous 30 acres of stubborn mesquite and the kind of dust that just laughs at the idea of rain. The place goes by the fancy name Ponderosa Pines Ranch Estates, which is hilarious because the only pines around here are in people's scented car air fresheners. But estates meant we had an HOA, and our HOA came with Barty Higgins, who somehow managed to retire from a career in regional paperclip distribution and still felt the need to enforce order, now wielding a beige Ford F-150 with amber lights he ordered off the internet. He called it the community patrol vehicle. We called it Bart's Big Beige Battle Wagon. Barty lived for the rules, especially the ones he made up. It started out pretty mild. First time my old mailbox was hanging by a thread, the door bent and the flag snapped off. Stuff happens, right? Fixed it up, moved on. A week later, the whole thing was flat as a pancake with tire tracks painting a pretty clear picture. I bought a tougher box, dug the post deeper, even poured in a bag of quick-set concrete. That lasted 9 days before someone guessed who flattened it again. This wasn't an accident anymore. The post was splintered, the box crumpled like an old beer can. I started getting suspicious. Mail on our route comes from Carol, the most careful mail carrier you could ask for, so I knew it wasn't her. I called the HOA office, really just Bart's garage, and left a message. Bart called back with that syrupy "yo." What a shame, son routine, though. I'm a good 10 years older than him. He gave me a whole speech about how a busted mailbox made the whole neighborhood look bad, and how lucky we were to have his vigilance. The irony clearly escaped him. Mailbox 3. I went a little sturdier, but tried not to go overboard yet. Lasted 2 weeks. This time, next to the tire tracks, there was a smear of beige paint. Guess what else is beige? I started logging dates, snapping pictures, keeping receipts. My wife just rolled her eyes and told me not to let Bart get under my skin. He's just a sad man with too much time and a big truck. Wise words, but I was starting to see this less as a hassle and more as an engineering problem, one I actually wanted to solve. The fourth mailbox went down in broad daylight, paint chip and all. That's when I decided, all right, time for a little reconnaissance. I pulled out an old wildlife camera, camouflaged it in a mesquite tree, and waited. The footage mostly showed grass and deer until I caught the big beige battle wagon swerving onto the shoulder right where my mailbox used to be. Not a smoking gun, but enough to confirm my hunch this wasn't bad luck or wild teenagers. This was personal. Why? Who knows? Maybe Barty didn't like my mailbox color. Maybe he just needed something to control. Armed with blurry evidence, I confronted him by the community notice board, caught him mid-lecture about the right shade of beige for gnomes. Showed him the video. He huffed and blustered, called my mailbox flimsy, and accused me of causing trouble. I walked away, but that word flimsy stuck in my head and gave me an idea. If Barty wanted war, he was about to get it, and I'd play by every single rule while making sure the next mailbox wasn't just strong, it was legendary. I dusted off the HOA bylaws, nothing about maximum durability, then the USPS manual, which only recommended breakaway posts for safety, not mandatory for rural routes like mine. I sketched out what my wife called an armored bunker for mail. Even my neighbor Jed, who'd tangled with Barty over non-regulation flowers, wanted to watch the installation. So I bought a length of 6-inch steel well pipe, dug a 4-foot hole, and mixed more concrete than some folks use for entire patios. The mailbox itself, heavy-gauge steel reinforced with welded bars, painted a perfectly boring black just to keep up appearances. Looked normal until you tried to move it. When the postmaster came to check it out, she gave it a shove, grinned, and said, "Nobody's moving that one." Everyone in the area, except Barty, knew what was up. I set up a new camera, this time visible, so Barty would know he was being watched. Days passed. The mailbox stood strong, untouched. Until one morning I caught Barty's truck cruising by. He actually stopped, leaned out, and with that trademark smirk said, "Going for a more robust model this time." "Let's see how long it lasts." I just smiled. Trying something different, Barty. Word got around. At the next HOA meeting, Barty rambled on about community standards, stealing glances at me while everyone else just tried not to fall asleep. What nobody knew, except maybe Jed, who winked at me across the room, was that the trap was set. And then came the day. Hot, clear Texas morning. I was out front pretending to weed. Here comes Bart doing his slow patrol clipboard in hand, amber lights flashing like a parade. He drifts right tires biting into the shoulder eyes, probably on some imagined violation, right up until his truck meets the unyielding force of my mailbox. There's this awful crunch, a bang, and Bart's F-150 comes to a dead stop, airbags puffing hood, steaming passenger side crumpled in like a crushed can. My mailbox. Maybe a scuff. Maybe. I dropped my rake and walked over as Bart stumbled out dazed, coated in airbag dust, red-faced with rage. "What did you do?" he shrieked. I started recording old habit by now and told him, "Looks like you hit my mailbox, Barty." "Everything all right?" He exploded, threatened lawsuits, called it a weapon. I kept it calm, pointed out the USPS spec said it had been there 2 weeks, and asked if he'd like to see the video evidence. By now, neighbors had gathered Jed front and center, grinning ear to ear. Then the sheriff's deputy showed up. Bart tried spinning wild stories about booby traps and hidden hazards. The deputy measured everything, watched the video, and calmly told Bart it was his own fault. She wrote him a ticket for failing to control his vehicle, and that was that. Barty Higgins, HOA kingpin, getting sighted next to his mangled patrol truck, while the world's sturdiest mailbox stood tall and smug. Afterward, the HOA board called an emergency meeting without me, of course, but Jed's friend kept me posted. Barty demanded I be punished, that my mailbox be removed, and that the HOA pay for his truck repairs. That's when my package arrived: photos, videos, a letter from my cousin who's a lawyer outlining every regulation I'd followed and every mailbox Barty had destroyed. The board decided smartly to table the matter indefinitely, refused to pay for his repairs, and soon after, Barty found himself stripped of his committee titles. Nobody rushed to put him back in charge. That mailbox. It's now a local legend. Even Carol, the mail lady, gives it a little salute as she drives by. People slow down, take pictures, and every once in a while someone stops to ask if it's really true that a mailbox finally stood up to the HOA and won. My life, thankfully, is back to normal, except for the gentle thunk of the mail hitting steel. Bart. He keeps his distance, a little humbler, a little less eager to declare war on inanimate objects. Honestly, if there's a moral here, it's that sometimes the best revenge is building something that lasts, a solution so solid even the biggest bully can't shake it. So what's your wildest HOA story, or the most creative way you've ever handled a neighbor who just wouldn't quit? Drop your stories below. I'd love to hear them. And if you enjoyed this tale of mailbox justice, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of everyday folks finally getting the last word.